Now, if you have multiple subnet, for example, in this case, you have subnet 1, 2, and subnet 3. So it basically defines at 10.0.0.0. Now, notice here, this one is defined at 10.2.0. So basically, I'm saying 10.20.0./16 is also locally associated with this VPC. You don't have to do anything here. Main routing table is automatically created for you. It basically, you can also create it, but when you create a default one, it basically creates it for you, and it knows the exact IP address string that it needs to associate with. Okay. All right, so this is where, again, another example. So for example, these are the ranges 10.0, 5, and 6, and 7. And these are all mapped. For example, this is your main routing table. This is by default created, right? And this is if you want to have an externally going out internet gateway that is associated with a specific subnet. You can also define that, and here you would create a routing table, and you would define what are the IP address range that needs to be actually associated with this subnet. So 0.0.0.0/0. Every traffic that is coming in with this IP address range would be actually going into this internet gateway to this subnet. So this is a custom IP. You can address it. These are the elastic IP address. So if you want to associate specific IP addresses to specific machines, you can get those elastic IP addresses and tie them here. For example, you can say this EIP 198.50.100.1, this is my IP address, is going to be associated with this local IP address, subnet IP address, which is 10.0.05. And then this one, 198.50.100.2 is associated with 6, and so on and so forth. So you can map or associate elastic IP address that you can get, which means that whenever your EC2 instance is recycled, that elastic IP address would be still with that's associated with the same machine. You have to make sure that if you don't use those elastic IP address, you release them. And I'll show you how to actually get an elastic IP address, because you will get charged. And again, for your production environment, you may want to probably get some fixed elastic IP addresses. But if you're using, QA, and you really don't care if you get a new IP address, you can just leave it as is and use a dynamic IP address. Okay, if you look at the holistic diagram over here, so again, this is AWS environment. This is your VPC. Within VPC range, you have 10.0.0.1/16, 65,000 range defined. You can define a subnet where you say, okay, 10.0.10.24, and this one is 10.0.0.24. This is all associated with the router, because everything from the internet first comes in, and let's say that there's the internet gateway defined, and that comes into the routing table, right? Routing table basically says, okay, where do I go? And then let's say if you have an IP address, which is EIP, it says, I have to hit 198.50.100.1 from the internet. So internet gateway allows the traffic. It goes to the routing table. Routing table says, okay, there's the machine right here. And it translates that 198.51.100.1 to 10.0.5, because that is the main IP address that was defined at the 10.0.1 level. Sorry, give me a second. Here. So the internet, this green line shows you these are the IP addresses which are being accessed from outside, right? Obviously 10.0 range is an internal subnet IP address. Not everybody would know. That's why you need an external EIP, which is defined over here, 198.50.100.1, which basically is used by the internet gateway to forward to the routing table. And then routing table says, okay, this is the machine that they want to access to. Okay, so these are the components, right? So you have the VPC, you have the subnets, you have your router, which basically has the routing table and determines that. And then you have internet gateway, which is basically exposing all the traffic to and fro from the internet. Okay. Okay, what is a CIDR address, right? A CIDR notation is a compact representation of IP address and is associated with routing prefix. The notation is constructed from an IP address with a forwarding slash, right, and a decimal point. For example, I've given you this as an example, 10.10.0.0/16, right? And this is the formula I was talking about, right? So it would give 32 minus, in this case, 192.168.100.022 would be 32 minus 22, right? 32 is because of the 32-bit, because everything is 8-bit, right? So that's why you see, and the range is you have 4 bytes IP address range. So that's why it has 8 bits in each byte. So you take 4 times 8 is 32 bits. So you take 32 minus 22, which is defined right here by /. This would give you 10, and then again in the decimal notation, you would take 2 to the power 10 would give you 1024 IP addresses. So then it starts putting it 192.168.100.0 to 192.168.103 to 255, because obviously if you take an octet, which is a 8 bits long a byte, then you can have maximum of 8 bits there, which can be turned on, and that 8 bits, it would give you a 255 range, right, a decimal range. So that's why the maximum value in each octet or each decimal number would be 255, and as this number is 1024 addresses, that's why it says, okay, you can go from 192.168.100.0 to 192.168.103 to 255. Okay, so this is how you define how many IP addresses you can have within it, and the formula that you use is 32 bits, again because of the 4 decimal or 4 bytes, and then 8 bits in each octet, and multiply that by 4, so that would give you 32. And then whenever you put /22, this is how many address ranges you are asking. So 32 minus 22 is 10. 2 to the power 10 in decimal in binary would give you 1024. IP6, this is again an advanced topic. IP4, we are soon running out of IP address range, so they wanted to actually go with the next level of version of IP addresses. So IP6 is coming out, which would actually give you a lot more address space than IP4. Okay. All right, let's talk about what is a subnet. Subnet, again, I touched briefly, is a segment of an Amazon VPC IP address range, right? Used for launching EC2 instance, RDS, and other AWS ranges. For example, 10.0.1.024 or 10.02, which is in green, are 2 subnets where instances can be launched. Right, the first 5 IP addresses are basically reserved by AWS, so you can't use them. 10.0.0.0.0, 1, 2, and 3, and I think 4, if I remember correctly, is reserved by future usage. 0 is for routing table, and 1 and 2 and 3 are used for other reasons for AWS. You cannot use those first 5 IP addresses in that subnet domain. So you can always start from 5, 6, and onwards. Subnets can be spanned across multiple AZ, but you can have multiple subnet. Subnet cannot be spanned across AZ, but you can have multiple subnet in a single AZ. So I think in my previous example, I showed you right here. So this is actually multiple subnet defined, right, in a same availability zone. Okay,